Welcome to the Marquette Hoops Basketball Show. My name is John Dodds. Tom Pippins is on assignment. Our show is brought to you by Moonlight Graham, a great partner providing modern dental benefits. The theme of our show is We Live in the Past, so you don't have to. But today, we live in the present. Our guest today is Ben Steele, a reporter from the Journal Sentinel and JS Online. He covers the Marquette beat. We'll talk about Justin Lewis, who declared for the NBA this week. Finally, I'll ask Ben to give his commentary on each individual Marquette player. Here is Ben Steele of the Milwaukee Journal. Ben, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Dodds. Am I the first two-time guest on the show, or have others crossed that territory first?
You are the first. Actually, Mark Miller was the first, and you're the second. So,
okay.
But thank you very much. Appreciate that. A lot of interesting things have happened.
I'm coming for you, Mark Miller.
Pardon me?
I'm coming for you, Mark Miller.
That's right. A lot of interesting things have happened to Marquette since the season ended and since you were last on the show. The big thing, probably the earthquake, was Justin Lewis decided to stay in the NBA. What was your take on that?
Yeah, it was kind of what I expected. Usually my rule of thumb when somebody declares for the NBA draft that they're in it until they're not. And I expected that he would stay in the draft unless the workouts that he had with NBA teams went completely awry, which didn't seem to be the case. It seemed like he's firmly on the early second round territory as far as his draft stock. Now the question this year, especially with all the NLI stuff going on with college basketball, was if there would be enough money that could sway him to stay in college for another year. But he declared that he was staying in the draft. And when I talked to him after he made the decision, it sounded like he was just ready to take the next step, just ready to challenge himself to play at the NBA level. And, that's a dream for all these guys. And he's got the chance to make it happen. And, fair play to him to chase after his dream.
What a remarkable year he's had. A year ago, he had come off his freshman year where, yes, he made the tip against Wisconsin. And, yeah, he had I think, the double-double or close to double-double in the big win at Creighton. And but then he suffered that lower leg injury and really impacted him the final third of that season. And I remember about a year ago, I was talking to Greg Elliott at the block party on the Marquette campus. And I said, well, what's new with the team, or what have you noticed about the new coach? He said, the biggest thing I've noticed is Justin Lewis is now shooting a three-point shot like a guard. And he's handling the ball really well. And that's something I didn't see that freshman year, that using him as more of a small forward, handling the ball and shooting from the outside. But Elliott said, wait till you see the guy. And that was right. He was fantastic last year.
Yeah, it went from, I think it was 21% on three-pointers as a freshman up to, I think, 34, 35% as a sophomore. I'm going off the top of my head, but on a much higher volume too, as you mentioned. Yeah, and there's still plenty of room for growth there in the three-point line for him. And I think that's what intrigues the NBA scouts about Justin. Like, his form was always good. It always looked good. It just wasn't going in his first year. He seemed to have good rotation on his shot. But yeah, he put in a lot of reps, like you mentioned, over the summer, and he just got better. And he's always been a hardworking guy, and I think NBA teams are kind of betting on that improvement's just going to keep making another couple leaps in the next couple years.
In the video that I saw of him, he didn't miss from the three-point line in all his drills. So his measurables were unique, very long. He's 6'7.5", but his arms were about 7'2", his arm length. So he had a lot
his hands were huge too. I think they were 10 inches, 10 and a half inches, something like that, like the second or third most biggest hands in the draft, which is, he's got huge mitts.
Yeah. Well, we wish him the best. I know he's from Baltimore, and I remember he left last year during October because a friend of his was shot and killed there, and he went back for the funeral. So if he can help his family, more power to him, and we wish him the best. Now, one of the additions Marquette made was they went to the transfer portal, and they are able to get 6'8" Zach Reitzell, the forward from Loyola of New Orleans. What have you? I know you talked to Shaka about him at one point. What was his take, or what are they looking for?
He's just a veteran guy, after losing, Elliott, Kirkweth, Daryl Morcell, and Justin Lewis from last year's team, but it's still a pretty young roster. So I think the staff was kind of looking for a veteran guy that can come in that's been around. Uh, this is Zach Reitzell's fifth year in college basketball. Now he's played at the NAIA level, but it was a really good NAIA team, the national champions. I think they lost one game last year. And what the staff liked about him, he's got a really good body. Like he's if you see photos of him, if you watch videos, if you go on YouTube and watch videos of him, like he looks kind of like he's got that tight end type of body, really thick, muscular. He looks like a guy that's been in college for going into his fifth year. So they like that about him. They like that. I think Shaka mentioned that when they watched tape of him, that he does a lot of winning plays. Like he's always in the right spot on defense. He's always hustling after the ball. Those kind of little plays that coaches like to see. So, like the obvious question with him is, like what translates from the NAI level to the Big East and high major college basketball. That's going to be one of the fascinating things to watch about next year's team. But Shaka and the staff, those guys seem to think like those little things those things translate from any level across basketball. Whether the stats translate as far as rebounding and points per game, that's hard to say. Like I have no idea. I've never seen a player make this kind of leap before, so it's going to be incredibly interesting to watch. But they definitely like his veteran presence and his voice. And when I talked to Zach Reitzell right after he committed to Marquette, he seemed really confident in his abilities. He seemed like a very mature guy. So those are things that the staff definitely likes about him.
He looks like a player that can give him some flexibility by being able to play power forward or small forward. Those positions are kind of interchangeable in the Marquette offense.
Yeah, he's not a great shooter. I mean, you look at his 3-point numbers. I think it was like 4 for 28 on 3-pointers last season. So maybe there's improvement there, but I wouldn't count on him being able to step out and shoot it. But definitely defensively, I think he's got the versatility that can guard across multiple positions, which is a trait that Shaka and that staff likes a lot.
There was one transfer, and that was not unexpected, Greg Elliott. And Greg was probably one of the biggest characters I've ever come across. He would be skipping, talking to himself. He would psych himself up. He was tougher than nails. I remember when the LSU power forward walked through the Marquette huddle to intimidate him. He got right in his grill, the little guard, and it was I remember that one. He was just snake bit with injuries. It seemed like every time he was ready to really take a step, he hurt his thumb his freshman year and played through it to show his toughness. And then he had a great summer after his freshman year. And then his sophomore year, he re-injured the thumb about in October, and they redshirted him in a year where, wow, if he would have played that year and given him more depth, maybe Marcus Howard doesn't get tired in that great year. But and then he was coming back again, and then he broke his lower leg, landing on a foot, and that really took him 2 years to recover from. So what was your take on Greg Elliott, who's now transferred to Pittsburgh?
Yeah, super nice guy. Like you mentioned, all-time character, all-time great teammate. Like teammates loved him. That was probably the biggest character trait of Greg Elliott that I'm going to remember. He played with a lot of players. Like one of his last press conferences right before the senior day, we were after all the questions. I kind of mentioned to him that I had counted up like all his teammates that he played with at Marquette. I think it ended up being, if you include walk-ons, it was close to 40 people. It's got to be the most of all time of any Marquette player, just because going through the coaching change and there was 9 new players this year, and this era with players transferring and coming and going, he seemed to be a guy that got along with everybody, like walk-ons, star players, guys who were unhappy here and left, and he remained friends with them. Just I think like one of the all-time great Marquette teammates. That's how I'm going to remember Greg Elliott. And the last link to the Bradley Center. He was the last player that was around that played at the Bradley Center. Which, if you think like it's crazy that he was around that long, but yeah, he definitely an all-time great Marquette dude.
Yeah, Shaka and Wojo said the same thing about Elliott, that he was one of the smartest players they've ever come across, and he'd be a great coach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I remember one of the first instances of Greg playing was in his freshman year when he was playing with that cast on his thumb. They threw him out there. It was at Villanova, and this was that really great national champion Villanova team, that 2017, 2018 national champion Villanova team that was, you know, probably the best college basketball team that I've seen in person and covering the last 10 years or so. Just shot the lights out. That team was awesome, like 5 or 6 NBA players. But they threw Greg in to guard Jalen Brunson. And, Greg he's still skinny, but back then he was like super skinny as like a freshman. But he battled Jalen Brunson. And I remember after that game, they lost that game. It was at the Wells Fargo Center. And yeah, Wojo mentioned after that game that he had complete faith in Greg Elliott to throw out there on a guy who would be first team All American. I think he won multiple National Player of the Year awards, and Jalen Brunson, and Greg was guarding him pretty well that day. So he's always been trusted as kind of that smart, intelligent, cerebral defensive type player, and that like injuries they really sap like his athleticism. So he never could reach that potential as a great defender, but always a smart guy.
Just before Christmas and the year he sat out, he wanted to return. So he had missed half the year, and he was all set. He told me he was returning during an interview, and he went into Wojo's office, and Wojo said, "No, I would love to have you, but you need to sit out a year. I'm trying to think what's best for your career." He called his family up and told them that. And I remember Junior Cadogan came back from an Achilles tendon injury his freshman year early and played about half the year, and he regretted it later. In that later year at the end of his career, he regretted it. But I remember at the end of that freshman year, Lazar Hayward won the MVP of that 2010 team, and as he accepted the trophy, he called Junior Cadogan up to the podium, and he presented his MVP trophy to Junior Cadogan for sacrificing an entire year to make his senior year better. And I thought that was really that was a unique moment, a special moment at a banquet. But Wojo not allowing him to come back, we'll see what happens. Hopefully, he has a big year at Pittsburgh and gets to play in the ACC, just like Theo John.
Yeah. Yep, and reunites with former Marquette assistant Jake Bersuti, who's the kind of, I forget what his title is there. It's like director of recruiting or something like that.
Marquette has had 12 players under scholarship last year, and for the 2023 team they have, or that recruiting class, they have, as of now, 2 open spots. And one of them, Marquette received a commitment last April from Zate Lowry, 6'4", 180-pound two-guard, athletic two-guard, kind of seen tapes of him, he looks kind of like a Morcell or a Dwayne Wade type player. He's from Kickapoo High School in Missouri. What did you find out about him?
Yeah, he's kind of a player that Shaka and his staff seem to gravitate to, like 6'4", 6'5", super athletic, guard multiple positions. That's probably the biggest thing. Really kind of um, kind of forecast him to play that interceptor role on the 1-2-2 press on the sideline, can kind of turn defense into offense. Really a slasher type. He's a lot like Chase Ross, who's going to be a freshman on the team next year. Same kind of slashing abilities on the offensive end and versatility on the defensive end. Yeah, I wrote a story a couple weeks ago about there's a lot of similarities in a lot of these players that Shock has been bringing in the last couple years since he's been at Marquette, and Zade Lowry kind of epitomizes that. I thought he'd be kind of an interesting example in Marquette's recruiting philosophies the last couple years, in that he's just kind of, you can see the potential there, and he's just kind of scratching the surface a little bit. He was a guy, like, he played on JV his sophomore year in high school, which is crazy to think. But Kickapoo in Missouri had a really good team. They had multiple Division I guys who were seniors on that team. So Zade Lowry kind of had to fight for a kind of role. He wasn't just given the keys to a team right off the bat like a lot of high level recruits are. So he's had to fight for his role on that team, and he's still kind of finding his way. You mentioned, like, he's 180 his weight, so he's definitely gonna have to get a lot stronger when he gets to college and um, after his senior year in high school next year. And actually, to to reach that potential, he's actually going to a prep school next year at La Lumiere in Indiana, which is plays a high level national schedule. So he'll definitely, I think, get better. He'll continue to keep making leaps, and he was a football player too in Missouri, and now that he's going to start focusing solely on basketball, I imagine, like, he's just going to continue to skyrocket as far as his ability.
It's interesting. Lowry does play two sports, just like Ben Gold played two sports in Australia, New Zealand.
Yeah, he was a rugby guy. And I think Shaka mentioned this when he announced the signing of Ben Gold, that he liked those kind of players who play multiple sports, especially like physical sports like rugby or football, because Shaka knows, I think he said that they weren't going to be soft. He knows that they're going to be physical. They're going to get after you on the defensive end. Uh, Sean Jones, who's going to be on Marquette next year, doesn't have quite the same versatility. I think his size kind of precludes that a little bit at 5'10" or 5'11", whatever they're going to list him as. So he doesn't have the ability to guard multiple positions, but he does have that in your face kind of defensive attitude. He grew up in Ohio, football territory. I think he was a good football player until he decided to focus exclusively on hoops. So that's it's definitely another shared trait amongst all these guys that are coming in.
Yeah, Sean Jones, the point guard in the 2022 class, he's on campus already, and watching some of his workouts, it's amazing how athletic he is, how he looks like he has a big East body already. And he might be 5'10", but he's jet quick, and he's strong. And I can see how he can get in your face.
Yeah, he's going to be a future terror to Big East point guards. I think they're not going to like him hounding them 94 feet, because he's not afraid to get up in your space and get after you. I think that's what they like most about him.
Let's look at the other two people from that class. The next one would be, you mentioned him before a little, just briefly, Chase Ross. Every time I see Chase Ross, it looks like he gives you something that maybe Cam Jones and Tyler Kolek don't at this time in their career. When he slashes to the lane, he can jump up and finish at the rim.
Yeah, he's got that vertical pop, I think, is the term that coaches like to use a lot. That he could definitely finish above the rim, slashing, left-handed guy, can really get into the lanes, and like I mentioned with Zay Lowry, he's got that defensive versatility where he can guard multiple positions when they're switching or when they throw on the full court press. Can wreak havoc in the passing lanes. Really interesting guy. It's going to be interesting to see, like, how much he can, if he can crack the rotation this year. I know he's another guy that's kind of got to build his body up a little bit, but he's definitely has the athletic tools for sure.
Ben Gold certainly is intriguing.
Mm.
6'10", 6'10 and a half. He's got that Steve Novak jump shot. And I remember Rick Majerus always used to love those big guys who could shoot the three-point shot and only had to jump maybe 3 inches. So when they shot 100 of them, they could still jump 3 inches as opposed to a little guy who had to jump 2 feet in the air on their jumper. They'd get tired and they'd get kind of goofed up in terms of when they got tired. But Ben Gold, he's intriguing. He could provide a lot of versatility in transition and in the half court
Hmm.
for him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, especially if they play him at the five. Like he's going to give them a little something different than what they had last year. With Kirk Queth playing center, he wasn't really a threat to shoot it. He was more of a lob threat. But kind of maybe it's going to kind of be like when Justin Lewis played the five a little bit. That they could play more of the five out, five guys around the perimeter, which opens up driving lanes if you're playing with a guy like Chase Ross that can open the lanes for them to slash a little bit. If you have a sweet shooting center out there that draws the defender away from the rim. Um, he, he's a guy. He seems like if you see photos of him from a couple years ago to what he looks like now, he's added a lot of bulk. He plays for the NBA Basketball Global Academy in Australia, so he's put in a lot of work with like really highly trained, uh, you know, strength and conditioning guys and skill guys. So I think he's going to be like a pretty important piece next year.
Also, they have a red shirt coming back, Keon Tidgery. Can you talk about him a little bit? He's supposed to be one of the most athletic players. Osei Iguodaro just raves about his athleticism when he at workouts, but he was very raw and had very limited
Mm.
offensive game.
Yeah, he was a fun guy to watch during warmups last year. Even though like he redshirted, he still dressed and did the warmups. But he's got super like his hops are out of control. Like I think it's a 40-inch vertical, something like that. And yeah, he profiles as kind of a crazy lob threat. Like this, that as you mentioned, the skills they weren't there at the beginning of last year. Like he's still pretty raw, and he didn't play that much that last year in high school because of COVID and all that limited his time on the court with like his AAU team and his high school team. So he's still just kind of scratching the surface of what he can be. And I'm sure I haven't seen him play since probably November last year in a practice. So I'm sure he's improved leaps and bounds since then. Um, so it's going to be that he definitely needs more experience on the court. I don't know if he's quite ready for a big role yet, but the physical tools are there, and if they can get him some experience on the court, we'll see how he fares.
One of the at one of the press conferences, Shaka Smart had mentioned that if Justin Lewis leaves, they're really going to have to count on David Joplin. The
Mhm.
spot has opened up, and he mentioned how good Joplin could be in terms of offense. He's got
Mhm.
that Ricky Pierce kind of look about him, the old Milwaukee Buck, where he's instant
Mhm.
offense. And
Yeah.
I know that Daryl Morcell told me when I asked him to tell me about David Joplin, he said, no one takes more bad shots on the team than David Joplin. In fact, he takes more bad shots than all the other guys combined, but he hits them. That tells me he's
Yeah.
really going to be good. So that was the best backhanded compliment I heard all last year. But they're really going to be counting on Joplin this year for scoring.
Yeah, he's definitely not afraid of putting up shots from anywhere on the court. Not shy at all. But he shoots like a really like it was fun. Like I mentioned, watching Kean warming up with his vertical leap. It was also fun watching um, Joplin with his watching him shoot before games because he shoots just like a really easy ball. It's just real natural rotation and he's definitely confident in his abilities. Coaches were leery of playing him last year just because he wasn't quite there on the defensive end yet. He still made a lot of mistakes, so he's going to have to improve a lot on that end. And Shaka mentioned several times last year that he was a guy that he could see. I don't know if he actually made any guarantees about Joplin leading the Big East in scoring, but he definitely said he was the kind of guy that could do that eventually at Marquette in his Marquette career. So he's got a chance this year to kind of live up to that province.
There's a lot of scoring going on because Shaka also said that if Cam Jones stays at Marquette for 4 years, he could be the all-time leading scorer. So now that
we'll have to check back in on those predictions in a couple of years.
That's right. Cam Jones has kind of got that Andrew Rousey attitude about him. I asked Andrew Rousey one time, what's his range? And he said, half court. As soon as I get over half court, I'm ready to go. And Cam Jones is getting to be the same.
Yeah, it's true. Both those guys have taken some pretty deep shots during game action. So they definitely share the same self-confidence.
Yeah, and then Stevie Mitchell. Stevie Mitchell really came on last year. He had that foot injury. I can't remember exactly what it was in October, or it was an Achilles or just a minor thing that kind of dogged him for about 10 days. And yes, a minor injury is any injury that happens to someone else. We all know that, but it set him back a little bit because he looked really good last October. In fact, I thought he was going to be the starter over Tyler Kolek.
Yeah, Steve is just a really good defensive guy. I think that's where he's going to make his mark. It's definitely how he earned some playing time, especially late in the season last year. Earned a lot of playing time just for his ability to guard and anticipate and be in the right places at the right time. Offensively, he definitely has to improve his shooting range and his shooting ability. I think when he was on the court last year, teams were definitely sagging off him a lot and clogging the lane. So he's going to have to improve that aspect. But yeah, they got a lot of collection of really good guards in the backcourt. It's going to be I keep mentioning interesting things to watch next season, but that's another one that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, just with the amount of players they have in the backcourt, how the playing time shakes out.
We're coming to the end of the show, and we appreciate you going above and beyond. We've been talking with Ben Steele. He covers the Marquette beat for the JS Online and the Milwaukee Journal. Ben, you tied Mark Miller's record for most guest appearances on our new show, so we appreciate that, and thanks for going above and beyond.
Nice. I'm gonna hang the banner in my house.
Great. Thanks to Ben for going above and beyond and coming back to tie Mark Miller's record for most guest appearances. Our show is brought to you by Moonlight Graham, a great partner providing modern dental benefits. Until next week, thanks for watching.